public meeting that is required under the Planning Act to afford any person an opportunity to make representation with respect to a proposed zoning bylaw amendment to permit 2 3-story apartment buildings, 1 5-story apartment dwelling, and existing triplex located at the 57, 59, 65, and 75 Walnut Street. Before we begin, members of the public are advised that only specific stakeholders, including the applicant, the minister, public bodies, or a specified person as defined by the Planning Act and or registered owner of any land to which the zoning bylaw amendment would apply, may appeal the council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Further, if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Corporation of the City of St. Thomas before the amendment is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal, unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Those wanting to be notified of council's decision on any application should email customer service at customerservice@stthomas.ca, indicating which public meeting they wish to be notified on and provide their name and address. For those that don't have access to a computer and wish to be notified, please call customer service at 519-631-1680, extension 0, and provide that same information. Do any of the members of council have a disclosure of interest concerning the matters on this agenda? Seeing none, I will ask the Madam Clerk, what method of notice and when was the notice given to the public for this meeting?
Your Worship, notice was provided in the St. Thomas Times Journal on Friday, December the 19th, 2025, and in accordance with council policies, notice was also mailed to property owners within 120 meters of the subject property.
Okay. I'm going to introduce our Manager of Planning Services, who will provide the background information on the proposal and present the draft bylaw. You're up and running. Look at that. See how much I just stalled so you could get through there?
I appreciate it.
All right. So you're up.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship. We're here tonight for the public meeting for the draft zoning bylaw amendment, which was submitted by CJDL on behalf of Walnut Park Inc. for 57, 59, 65, and 75 Walnut Street. I would also just like to acknowledge that the applicant and their team are in attendance tonight up in the gallery. So if there's any questions directed at them, I'm sure they're more than happy to answer. I'll start off with the subject lands. So the subject lands are located on the southwest corner of Walnut and Stanley Street. They're approximately 2.08 hectares, of which about 1.32 hectares is developable. The site will look familiar to a lot of you because back in 2021, there was a zoning bylaw amendment approved by the Ontario Land Tribunal for a 3-story building, a 5-story building, and an existing triplex. So that 3-story building has been constructed. The 5-story building is in for its building permits, and the existing triplex is also occupied. So that same developer has purchased the lands at 57 Walnut Street, which was the site of the former Walnut Manor supportive housing residence, which burnt down. And so that site is currently vacant. This developer has purchased it. The zoning bylaw amendment before us tonight applies to that entire site, because of 57 Walnut, along with 59, 65, and 75 Walnut, because they're looking to develop it comprehensively. There's no changes being proposed to the previously approved 3-story, 5-story apartment buildings and triplex. It's just a new 3-story apartment building that's proposed to be added to the 57 Walnut lands, which is the only difference in the proposal you'll see tonight. Here are some pictures of the subject site. So 57 Walnut Street, you'll see is vacant. Then you've got 65 Walnut Street. That's where the 5-story building has been approved to go and is in for the building permits. 59 Walnut Street, that's the triplex, and 75 Walnut Street, that's a 3-story, 28-unit building, which is occupied and constructed. It seems to have frozen a little bit here. Oh, there we go. So this is just the site plan showing that was submitted by the applicant, showing what's been proposed. So you'll see here, there's the 3-story, 28-unit building. There's the existing triplex. There's the 5-story building. And then you'll see over here on the west, that's the new proposal, which is the 3-story, 22-unit building and the associated parking. So the subject lands are designated residential for the northern part of the site, and then the southern part of the site is natural heritage with a natural hazards designation. I will say that what the applicant is proposing at 75 units per hectare does fall within our high density residential designation, or high density category in the residential designation. So it was evaluated, or the evaluation is being based on those criteria. So this is just showing the existing zoning on the subject site. So ignore the bolded lines. That was some severance discussions that the applicant was talking about for mortgage purposes. But this was submitted with their application. And you can see here in the pink, this is the R544. This is the existing approval for those 3 buildings. Then to the west, there's the 57 Walnut, which is zoned in the 4th residential zone. So it does allow for apartments, but only up to 6 units, which is why the amendment has had to come forward. Then to the south, we've got a portion that's zoned open space. And I would say that parking lot is permitted in the open space zone. And then there's also a portion that is zoned natural heritage. And I would say that, you'll see there's a parking space shown in the natural heritage, but we've been speaking with the applicant, and the plan is that would be removed. So then this is showing the draft zoning bylaw amendment. So you'll see that everything that was in that R544 and the R4 zone are proposed to be part of this new R5 special provision zone. So it would effectively rezone those lands, this new R5 special provision zone. And the changes that are proposed to the existing zoning include permitting an additional 3-story building, which would be 13 meters tall, up to 13 meters tall, which was the height permitted for the 3-story building in the previous approvals. And it would be for 22 units located at 57 Walnut Street, increasing the minimum lot area to include that 57 Walnut Street, and also increasing the minimum required parking just to account for those additional units. And the new parking rate, the previously approved parking rate was 1.28 spaces per unit. This would be about approximately 1.27 spaces per unit, both of which exceed our zoning bylaw standard for apartments of 1.25 spaces per unit. And then the existing R544 zone would be repealed. So the idea is the applicant wants to develop the site comprehensively, which is why they've come in for this change to what they'd had previously had approved. So that's just a larger picture of the same. I'll just go through the draft zoning bylaw. So this is just effectively showing that new, the proposed zone on our schedules. So then the area affected would effectively be the area that I had previously shown. The only permitted uses are the existing triplex dwelling, apartment dwellings, and uses accessory to the foregoing. I will say you'll see in this bylaw, it's a little bit more detailed than our normal bylaws, but that's because there was so much discussion about the previous amendment. And this draft bylaw is the exact form of the previously approved bylaw, just recognizing all of the work that went into it, all of the OLT approvals, and that there were so many important features that needed to be considered. And so then permitted buildings and structures include one existing triplex dwelling, an apartment dwelling, another apartment dwelling with 46 units, and then the new proposed apartment dwelling with 22 units. And then also the location of the buildings and structures is actually secured on a schedule, which I'll show in a minute, which is not typical, but was done in the previous approval for this. So was done in this particular instance. The minimum lot area, which is increased to include 57 Walnut, maximum lot coverage, which is unchanged. And the building height is also unchanged. And then the minimum parking was increased with the new proposal. One thing I will say just before, and also repealing that previous R544 zoning, and then just replacing one of the schedules with the new mapping at the time the bylaw is consolidated. So you can see here, this is the zone map proposed. This is the proposed location securing those buildings, which is just based on, it's not something we typically include, but in this case, it was included because of all the previous discussions. And then also this map here, just sort of showing it within the broader zoning map 14. One thing I will just mention, just because I think when I went through my presentation, when I was pressing the button, it skipped over the slide showing the surrounding area. But one important feature is that right next to this building is the old St. Thomas Church. And the old St. Thomas Church is designated Part 4 under the Ontario Heritage Act. So as such, there's a heritage adjacency, that's what we call it. And they have done a heritage impact assessment. And the application is going to the Municipal Heritage Committee on Wednesday. And those comments will be brought forward in our follow-up report. I will say the applicant, they were proactive and they went to the Heritage Committee before they submitted. And they've also had continuous discussions with the old St. Thomas Church too. So it'll be, we'll relay I'll be sure to relay the feedback from the Municipal Heritage Committee when the report goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation on the new bylaw. Madam Clerk, have we received any written submissions on the proposed changes?
Your worship, we have not received any written submissions.
Council, it is your turn first. So if you have any questions, please raise your hands. Councillor Woki.
Thanks, Your Worship. A few comments more than anything, Michelle. I'm pleased that it lists the existing triplex as a permitted use because my question was going to be, and I'm not thinking anybody sinister, but we always have to think forward, that when we say yes to this, can they do what they want with that existing triplex? So I appreciate that it's listed in there as existing, not a triplex or a building, but as the existing triplex. Again, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but we don't want to make a mistake like that and then have something be torn down the middle of the night. I'm also pleased, really pleased that the proponent went to the Heritage Committee ahead of time because, of course, we want to hear what concerns they have because that church is a very, very, very important piece of our history, as is the graveyard and who's there and the whole story behind that. So I'm very happy and considering what was there at one time and then the remnants of what was there, this is a nice way to improve that area. Thank you.
Further questions from council? Councillor Reimel.
Thanks. My understanding, I'd received a site plan from Lou about my concern was the perimeter between the new 3-story apartment and the old St. Thomas Church, but that there's quite a nice solid steel fence all along the property and then also landscaping, hedges and things in between. So it looks like there's a good buffer between the two pieces of property, which is good.
Further council questions? You can join in at any time with further questions, but we'll now also open it to the public. We'll now open the meeting to questions from the public for those who attend and have not already submitted their concerns or comments to the city. If you're listening on a computer, and I do see we have some people online, tablet or smartphone, please click the raise hand icon. And if you've called into the meeting on a phone, dial *9, and the questions will be taken as you've identified that you want to make comments. When given the opportunity to speak, please provide your name and address for the clerk. My understanding is we have our staff in the audience, in the upper audience, with a microphone. So you would report to him and we'll use those in sequential order also. If I can ask that when you come to the microphone or you're put online, can you first of all identify who you are and your address? So name and address so that we can have that for the clerk's record so we can be sure to keep you informed in the future. So is there any questions in the upper gallery? Please go see our microphone in the corner. And I have a hand up from a fellow named or someone named Mike on the computer. And I'll start there, I guess. And please, again, council, you can also jump back in at any time. Okay, great. I'll since we haven't turned Mike on yet, let's go to the microphone upstairs.
Okay, it's Mara Scomparent, 56 William Street. I have a couple of concerns. I read the report. The one was about the traffic report, which was based on a 2020 traffic impact study, which I don't know if everyone remembers, but it was COVID and there was very little traffic. And we had brought this concern up back with the first development. So they're doing some numbers and adding to come up with their figures, but I really don't think 2020 is a good year to do the traffic study. And then in the report, it stated that the forecasted traffic volumes have been assessed for a horizon year of 2026, which the report says is 5 years after the development completion. Well, we're in 2026 and that development is not completed. So I just kind of think there's a lot of faults in this report because the one building's been built, 28 units. There's the existing triplex, and then there's still when I looked on the plan, I thought it was 48 units. I guess it's 46, but that hasn't been built yet. And we've already noticed a big difference in traffic volumes just with the 28 unit. So I just find that a little bit misleading when they're putting in the report that everything's already been developed. Okay, another question I had was, how many parking spaces will there be on the property in total?
Okay.
Is there?
I'm going to let you ask all of your questions, and then we'll try and handle them all at once.
Oh, because it does, because in the report that I read, it said the development will provide 154 spaces, 3 fewer than the zoning requirement. And this is on page 27. But on the site drawing, I'm counting 28 spaces for the new part that they want to do the bylaw amendment. And then it's adding up to 128. So if it's supposed to be 154, they're 28 spots less than they should be. That's equivalent to one of the apartments. And so I'm having a little bit of an issue with that. And then they're talking about pedestrian circulation, that there's lots of sidewalks. Well, the one on Walnut on the south side just goes to the entrance of their property. There's no sidewalks on King Street, no sidewalks on Pleasant Street. It's not pedestrian friendly anymore. And then, what I just wanted to say, I thank the councillors for voting it down, previous development, and it did go to LPAT. We did hire a lawyer who got denied participation in LPAT, which was disappointing. But and I'm just kind of hoping that the councillors will kind of review everything closely and not allow this to be 4 times the amount that it is right now. And it's interesting to see that the developer said it's vacant land. It wasn't vacant when they purchased it. There was a viable building. Maybe the business didn't work out, but it was interesting how it burnt down and it was cleaned up within a matter of 2 days. And then all the beautiful pine trees that divided that property were all chopped down. And of course it's vacant now. So that's a little bit upsetting. But I do have one big ask of the city and the councillors, that whether this goes through or not, that if they would possibly consider opening up Church Street between Center Street and Talbot Street to alleviate or redistribute the increase in vehicular traffic in this neighborhood. That's my big ask. So thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, would you like to answer some of, maybe in the same order, hopefully, the questions as they came in?
Yeah, no problem. So through your worship, so effectively, in terms of the traffic report, that is something that is being reviewed. The report indicated that there wasn't seen as being any sort of negative impacts from a traffic standpoint. All the intersections were to still operate at capacity. Once I sort of finish going through this, I will turn it up to the applicant in the gallery if they have anything to add to that effect. And then in terms of the number of parking spaces proposed, they are in the draft zoning bylaw, we're looking at 126 parking spaces, which would be comprised of 119 parking spaces and then 7 accessible parking spaces. That is a parking rate of 1.27, which exceeds the zoning bylaw requirement for apartments of 1.25. And then I'll just still pass it over to the applicant if should they have anything to add in terms of the traffic.
You're going to have to go to the microphone or we can't record what's going on. So please, if you could, thank you though.
Okay, thank you, Michelle, through you, your worship. I think really the only question to clarify from Michelle's initial response was just the date on the traffic study. So there was a traffic study done in 2020 with the initial report that was updated with the recent planning application. So there is the initial forecasted build out was 2026, I believe, in the initial report, and then as part of the updated report, the conclusion state that the anticipated build out rate is 2029, so 3 years from now, and concludes that the study area intersections and the driveway operate at an acceptable level of service. So it has been updated to accommodate the additional 22 units and has been analyzed with that in mind. So thank you.
Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for the presentation, Mary. That's good. You do make a good point about opening up from Church to Talbot Street, but I'm not so sure the city can do that. Do we own that land where we can put a road right through to Talbot Street from Church? Or is that something that the developer would have to do, or do we own it? I guess that's the question. Would we want to do it either, but.
I believe it is a road right away, but maybe I can ask Kevin. Kevin, do you know if that is a?
I'm just waiting for my computer to pull up the mapping. I'll give you an answer in just a sec.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll hold you in abeyance. Thanks. You have something more, please?
Yeah, I just, because I read it in the report that said the development will provide a supply of 154 spaces, 3 spaces fewer than the zoning requirement, 157. The reduction is not significant and will not cause parking. Why is it what I read was 154, but now we're being told it's 128?
Michelle, do you have further on that report, please?
So through your worship, I don't have the report in front of me, but it's possible it's a typo. The total number of units is 99 units. Our parking and the number of spaces, it accounts to that 126. So the required parking would be slightly less than that 126 because it would be 1.25 spaces per unit. Unfortunately, I don't have a calculator in front of me, but it would be less than the 126.
Okay. Okay, I can leave you a copy of what I had on the report that I read. Okay.
Through you, your worship, I realized I didn't introduce myself last time. My name is Darren Lyle from CJDL. So we're the applicant on behalf of Walnut Park Inc. I believe that 156 units is from the very first application when the unit count was significantly higher on the very first time it was applied for. Then public comments were received and then the unit count was reduced down. So I believe that is just a typo, as Michelle said. The 126 parking spaces per unit, or 126 parking spaces total, is what we're intending on applying for, and that meets the city's parking ratio of 1.25 per residential unit. Thank you.
Okay, next. I have any other questions from council? No, I have Councilor Baldwin Sands.
Thank you.
As I have online one. Go ahead.
With this 3-story right adjacent to the old St. Thomas Church and the height that it is talking about, have there been shadow impact studies to the actual old St. Thomas Church? If you can refresh my memory on that, because I do also have the questions that were brought up about the trees, et cetera, because we now have a new tree trust program for private property. Wondering how we can look at some of those, and especially the area right along that area right adjacent to the sidewalk of the old St. Thomas Church, how that would be impacted by those shadows, directly those grave sites and the historic information that they have right at the corner of the project too. So I'm concerned about those pieces may be lost with this new development. Thank you.
Michelle?
Okay, so through you, your worship, I don't have the shadow study in front of me, but I did previously note that when I was reviewing and got my notes that the only impacts from the shadows that I saw were primarily in December. I will, in the follow-up report, address the shadows in relation to the old St. Thomas Church. But my recollection is that the shadow impacts were limited to December when we typically have longer shadows.
I will also note that the morning sunshine is also the only heat source for the majority of time the church is there, because it doesn't have an external heat source or an updated, more modern heat source that it does rely directly on a lot of sun hitting the old building.
Councilor Herbert, can I, on the, I'll ask, because the chart that's up on the screen right now, the church is actually well back from the new building. Am I correct? They're not beside each other.
So yeah, it is further back from the building.
Councilor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. Well, when we talk about shadows, what's the difference when the old Walnut Manor was there compared to the new unit going in there? Is it going to be that much higher and that much closer to the Old English Church?
So through your worship, I don't believe so, but we didn't have a shadow study done of a comparison against the building that was previously there. The Heritage Committee, they will be reviewing this on Wednesday, and the developer has been engaging with the old St. Thomas Church. So I'll make sure that those comments are reflected in the follow-up report too.
Great. Next, I have a online, somebody named Mike with a hand up. If we can let Mike know that we're removing his muting. And Mike, if you're online, please give us your name and address and your question, please.
Good evening. Mike Langley, 58.5 Walnut Street, located directly across the street from the complex in question.
Okay.
I wish that I could fight City Hall, but I know I can't. So my comments and questions are basically going to deal with the project moving forward. I'd like to thank the lady on William Street for quoting the traffic studies and the number of parking spaces. When we moved in here 4 years ago, we wouldn't have had 120 cars pass our house in a week. And I now probably average, I'm going to say 200 exits every day shining directly into my house. And when this is done, we're probably going to be in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 a day. So I would like the city to very strongly consider the changes in traffic patterns that were brought up by the lady from William Street. They are going to be very, very significant in this area. My second point is I'd like to serve notice right now with the City Works Department and Engineering that we are going to ask to have Walnut Street swept with the street sweeper and washed with water every single solitary day. Last year, you finally brought the street sweeper down after much discussion, but they never used any water on it. So all they did was move the dust from one side of the street to the other side of the street. I couldn't have hosted anybody from the city council at my property for a coffee last year without first taking the hose and washing my home down completely. It was like living on a gravel road in the country. And I hope we don't have to go through that again. The next question or next comment that I have has to do with the property at 75 Walnut Street. Last year, it was used as a staging area for materials brought in for the now existing building. And my question is, what are the developer's plans for the increased amount of material that's going to be required to build a bigger unit first? And second of all, when that 75 Walnut Street property is developed, where are we going to stage materials? Because there's going to be a lot of product going to have to be brought in there. Now, I know the construction workers start at 7 in the morning, but last year it was not uncommon to have a float truck backing down Walnut Street with the backup beeper going at 5:30, 5:45 in the morning as they brought in the necessary equipment that they needed for their days, for their week's work. And that's a little disruptive to everybody that's trying to sleep or get up and go to work or whatever. But if we are dealing with two bigger buildings that are already there, that traffic is again going to be increased. The gentleman that drove the little track-wheeled front end loader last year ran up and down our street like it was a raceway, often starting well before 7 o'clock in the morning. I worked construction in the past. I did the type of work that they're doing here. I understand that they need to do these things, but I hope that the city is able to put some guidelines in place for the 3 or 4 or 5 houses that are on the street and are affected every single solitary day and will be for the next couple of years as we go through the completion of this project. Thank you.
Michelle, anything on that or from our developer?
So through your worship, it's likely best to turn it to the developer to speak to their construction staging and planning.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Through you, your worship. So on referring to the map that's on the screen, so the plan right now, when we construct the 5-story building, central south to the site, we're hoping to construct the parking lot westerly of that building, which is not constructed to date. So that will serve as the staging area for the 5-story building. And then in addition, that parking lot will remain in place and will serve as the staging area for the 3-story building as well. The site alteration permit application for that has been submitted to the city for their review concurrent with this application. So believe that we have a plan to keep it off of Walnut and surrounding streets and internal to the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from upstairs? All right, great. There is one. Let us know who you are and your address and your question, please.
My name is Philip McLeod. My wife and I own and live at 39 Stanley Street, which is right across the street from the 3-story, 22-suite apartment building known as 75 Walnut Street. That address is actually somewhat of a misnomer because the vast bulk of that building stretches a distance of almost 5 properties along Stanley Street, while its much smaller north end faces Walnut Street. So why it's has a Walnut Street address is somewhat baffling to us. I was among those citizens who, in the neighborhood, who opposed that apartment. We lost that battle, as you know, when Premier Ford and others arbitrarily changed the rules to favor developers, but I'm not here to argue that particular point. That's long now past. We live in this neighborhood. We received the letter that talked about this meeting. Those of us who bothered to drag ourselves down here probably could have been to some extent satisfied if the information that has been presented here tonight to council had been sent to us in advance. There seems to be, generally speaking, an attitude on this council that the people out large really don't matter all that much. We can read too. If we'd had a lot of this information, some of our concerns might have been put to rest a long time ago. But here are a couple of things, some of this information I've heard tonight, a couple of things that do simply still, or do still bother us. One is what is really going to be done to address the growing traffic congestion problem around Stanley Walnut intersection in the morning in particular, and again at 4 or 5 o'clock at night as the population increases by these developments. Now, I mean, I have heard several times now, I guess, because this is the second time there's been a public meeting on these applications. I've heard now several times various descriptions about how this group of people building or the people who are downstairs in charge of this are going to be dealing with these problems. But in fact, if you sit there night after night after night watching those two intersections of watching the amount of traffic that's trying to get by and wondering when the first or the next accident will occur, you get an entirely different impression of what the problem is than what seems to be reflected on the various reports I've heard. There are drainage issues off that property, and a significant increase in the pedestrian traffic begs this question: when will the city rebuild Walnut Street to provide appropriate sidewalks, curbs, and gutters in that area? I have a dog. My dog every day past these developments, mud, ice, snow build up because there's not an appropriate sidewalk there. As a final comment, I'd could say that we received simply a letter to say that this meeting was being held. It included a very small map with it that was marked not to scale. I'm surprised, I guess, that the planning department of this city, of all people, would send anyone a map of a controversial development proposal marked as being not to scale. What I would say is that I think it is appropriate on developments of this stage, of this size and shape, that the public who are directly affected, that is people like me and the citizens who presented here, are sent all of this information in advance. It should not be necessary for us to have to traffic through the very cumbersome online material that you have on your website to try and find the answer to questions we're not sure in our minds we really have. And you had some really good information here tonight that I've seen on various slides. Why couldn't we have had that in advance? It would have helped us understand more easily and more quickly exactly what it is that we're about to be faced with and about the decisions that you've been made on. I guess the final thing I would say is this. I find it interesting that many of the decisions that you make are based on information that's supplied to you by the people who want the decision made. Much of the stuff that you have in front of you has in fact been gathered by the people who want to build those buildings. And you trust all of that stuff. You don't seem to do any additional homework on your own. And I find that just a little bit, I guess, unnerving that you're believing absolutely some of the material that you're given. And I'll give you just one quick example in passing. We were promised in the material that was supplied to this council by the developer relative to the building that is across the street from my house. In that package of information was a study that was made for the developer that assured everybody that the shade study was such that it would not ever impact the people who lived along Stanley Street on our side. Yet it did. It does every day. We no longer see sunsets. We don't see the sun in the late afternoon and early evening, all of those things that we used to see before. Son of a gun, I guess. But maybe that would have colored your decision a little differently had you had access to better information, and surely it would have if we'd had that access. Thank you.
I guess the best I can say is thank you for the information on the public meeting and how you received the information. I'll certainly have that conversation with the clerk. We tend to see this information at public meeting also, so that everybody who wants to attend to get it comes to the public meeting to see it. But let's see if there's a way of distributing more of it beforehand, and we'll have that conversation before our next public meeting. Further questions, Councillor Clark?
Well, I'd just like to remind the public that council didn't agree with this project, and we tried to fight it, and we're not successful.
I see an old friend with their hand up on here, so I think I'm probably going to give him time. Councillor Peters? Okay, wait. Council just voted unanimously not to give you time. But if you're unmuted, Steve, please join us, and it's great to hear from you again tonight.
Well, thanks very much, Your Worship. Steve Peters, 41 St. Catherine Street, St. Thomas, Nancy 5 Peter, 2 Victor 7. Thanks very much, Your Worship. I'm going to start with my own personal comments first, and then I will also be making some comments as the Vice President of the Old St. Thomas Church Restoration Committee, which is located at 55 Walnut Street. So I'm going to speak some of my own comments first. One, I certainly agree with Phil. For years and years, it was known as 46 Stanley, not 75 Walnut. Vince always referred to it as that. But I want to just comment on the West End. For years, the 10-year city infrastructure master plan has had Walnut Street and King Street and Center Street and Pleasant Street, and it gets bumped year after year after year. The city's done an outstanding job at rehabilitating the West End of St. Thomas, but there is a part that is being forgotten about, and that is that West End. And because I think the issues that are raised are very valid, from whether it's pedestrian and sidewalks, drainage. I can tell you we've got in front of 55 Walnut Street, we have a huge storm drain that every big rainfall is just full of water. And then it runs right down to the end of Walnut and Pleasant Street, where it's a huge quagmire. So I would really encourage an acceleration of that West End master plan, because then that ties into Church Street. I agree with some of the comments that were made by Mara and Councillor Herbert. Let's get Church Street opened. It is owned by the city. The right-of-way, it was closed about 1960, but the right-of-way is still maintained. And I just think that the city needs to get on and accelerate the West End master plan. The other thing that I wanted to raise personally, because as someone that drives, sorry, Mike, I might be stirring up that dust on your street, but, wearing my other hat as the old church, I drive that area, if not daily, every second day. And there are some serious sightline hazards at the corner of Walnut and Stanley Street. The house at the northwest corner of Walnut and Metcalf has a smoking bush, there's a name for it, that when it's in full bloom, your sight lines to the north are almost non-existent. And then there's a heritage plaque there that is encumbered by a yew tree. And that seriously impedes your sight lines trying to look to the south on Stanley Street. And I think if the yew tree was gone and just the plaque was there, I think the sight lines would probably be all right. But the sight lines to the north also really seriously need to be addressed. And I think as far as the plaque is concerned, if you were to talk to the Historical Society would I'm sure, work with the developer to even move that further back to help impede those sightlines. But the sightlines are a city issue. They're not a development issue. And I really think that that needs to be addressed. And as I say, the whole West End. I'm going to just speak for a moment, Your Worship, on behalf of the Old St. Thomas Restoration Trust. And we thank the developer, Domus, and has been very good at meeting with us and reaching out to us. And trying to address a number of the concerns that we have and will have. And we realize that some of those issues will be addressed at the Site Plan Control Committee, such as garbage and fencing and gates. And we look forward to that. We have reviewed the shadow study, and it appears not to impact on the church, and we're pretty grateful for that. But I certainly heard Phil McLeod's comments on what happened over there. It doesn't appear to the development doesn't appear to impact the sight lines of the church that the public would see standing on Walnut Street. So we're appreciative of that. We're appreciative of the work that Domus is going to do with us on dealing with trees between the two properties, because we do appreciate that. We want to make sure about, I noticed when I had the opportunity to review the documents about fire hydrants. There's an existing fire hydrant on Walnut Street, but I would remind council that there were some issues a few years back regarding a fire on Talbot Street near Jumbo and the very low water pressure down there at the west end. So I saw there was a water pressure report, but I just want to flag that. And we also want to ensure that there's fire hydrants on the site. If we're going to have two buildings sort of intersecting on what I would call the southwest corner of the Vinceberry property, we want to make sure that there's at least another fire hydrant in that area. As I say, we appreciate the work on the trees and the sight lines. And the only other thing I'm going to put my city or my personal hat back on is when this development is all said and done, to a comment that I think it was Councillor Wookie made initially about the original house, the original Vinceberry Ermatinger home, that perhaps the developer would consider designation when it's all said and done. So anyway, thanks, Your Worship. Appreciate the opportunity.
It's just as like you were here, Steve. Thanks. Any response to anything that was brought up by former Councillor Peters?
Through Your Worship, I'll just, sorry, Michelle, I'll just make one comment. Thank you for those comments, all excellent comments, and a lot of things that we will follow back up on and ensure that are in place during the site plan. I will just make a comment on the sight lines at the intersection and ballot points there. It is problematic. We'll do what we can do in terms of the bush on the north side. If there's any portion of that that's on public property, then there's some steps we can take to address that. As far as the on the south side with the plaque and the bush around the plaque, the applicant has been, he's been in dialogue with myself, but also it's reflective in our site plan for that site that he is going to, they do plan to relocate that closer to that gazebo. I think he's just been very sensitive in terms of the manner in which to move that. And I think they may be reaching out to the Heritage Committee folks on some, to get some of their input too, because it's an old stone that's there, and they want to make sure that there's no damage done to it. But that is definitely on the radar to get addressed, and that will improve the sight lines at that intersection. So I just wanted to make those comments.
Super. I have another guest up top. Please, name and address, and what's your question?
Hi, my name is Michelle Wardle, and I live at 5 St. Anne's Place. So between Stanley and William, I have 3 questions for you tonight. I just want to know, 1, will the construction traffic be going down St. Anne's again to finish the development at Walnut Street? Number 2, when is your projected end date for this project? And number 3, will the city be reconstructing the sidewalks and the road on Walnut Street? Thank you.
I don't know. Do we have answers for any of that, or as we come together, we'll have more? But
yeah, so I would likely turn questions 1 and 2 about the construction traffic and the projected end date. The applicant would likely better be able to speak to it. I believe Darren said 2029 was the projected end date, but I would want them just to confirm. And I believe, Kevin can correct me if I'm wrong, there is a Walnut Street reconstruction planned for the future, 2031?
Through the mayor to council, The reconstruction of this area, and we've heard about drainage issues, we've heard about water capacity issues, really hinges on the reconstruction of Old Talbot Hill. We need a storm drainage outlet first. And so we were unsuccessful in a grant application to move that project forward. That's the linchpin to all of this. So as soon as that project moves forward, we'll be able to move forward with phases 1 and 2 of this reconstruction in this area. And whether that includes the opening of Church Street or not, that's for council as the road authority to decide at that time.
Okay.
Well, again,
Thank
Your
you.
Worship-
First of all, thank you for being here and helping, because it's sometimes not as easy as this. Great.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Your Worship, and thanks, Kevin, for the response to the one point there. So construction traffic, sometimes in new developments where your developer is in control of unassumed roads, we're able to dictate the flow of the subcontractors working on the buildings a little more. But in this case, where there are existing road allowances, we really don't have control of whether they choose to take Stanley or Walnut or St. Anne's or anything to access the site. So, we channel them to the driveway, I guess, the entrance driveway, but kind of beyond that, the traffic kind of moderates itself, I guess. Center Street was under construction, or reconstruction, I should say, partially during the construction time for the 3-story building. So that may have impacted some of the traffic patterns for the contractors accessing the site. Date wise, so as we all know, the 3-story building on Stanley is complete and occupied at this point. The 5-story building previously approved towards the south side of the site. The building permits are in and approval should be expected shortly, I would imagine, through Michelle's office and Lou's office. So we're hoping to start construction on that in the very near term. And then on the 3-story building, a little bit dependent yet on market demand and that type of stuff, but within 2027, 2028 would kind of be a bit of a range on that. And then third point that I have noted down with respect to sidewalk and pedestrian connectivity, and that's been kind of a recurring question tonight, but that is something that the developer promotes. The existing road allowances within this whole kind of area of the city are substandard, I guess, per current terms, which would, typically be a 20-meter road allowance and something like this. But some of the ones in this area are 12 meters and 14 meters. So it's quite crammed to fit everything in. And even the existing kind of asphalt sidewalk on Walnut Street's actually on Domus's property. So the plan when the project is all said and done is that Domus is proposing to provide kind of a bit of a voluntary, I guess, road widening. It's still up for discussion with city staff, but we're looking at giving 3 meters along the Walnut Street frontage of the property to allow a proper sidewalk when the project's reconstructed. So still a bit to be sorted out with that, but that's been the discussion with staff over the last couple of years. So, thank you.
Thank you. I have another online call. It's a phone number, so if it's you, 519 something, please join us and we'll unmute you, or unmute you. And then let us know who you are and your address, please. You may have to also unmute yourself. (519) 670. I don't want to give your number out on TV, so let's, if your phone number starts with that and you're on the computer tonight to be at this public meeting, please unmute yourself and come on and tell us who you are, please. Well, I'm guessing there's no one there. Do I have anybody else upstairs? Nope. Councilor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. I don't want this to be lost in the shuffle somewhere. Ex-Councilor Peters, sorry, made the comment about the fire hydrants. I don't know whose responsibility it is to put them in, but I happened to be at that fire that as Steve mentioned, down by Jumbo, and the pressure coming out of those hoses was maybe going 15 feet. It just was non-existent. And I know there was a big follow-up on it. I see the fire chief is here. I don't know if he wants to comment on that or not, if the problem was solved. But I think we need at least 2 fire hydrants put in that area. It's very important with pressure. So I heard initially the pressure was bad at the west end, but I think it's been resolved. I don't know if Dave wants to comment on it or not. So if he knows much about it, but it's certainly a big issue. We need at least 2 more fire hydrants there.
Chief, thanks for being here tonight too. What do you know about the pressure you're under?
Hey, through your worship to Councilor Herbert. You are correct with that fire that we had. We had low pressure. And I think we spoke with Kevin in a follow-up and some of the stuff we can do. One of the things that we do is we look at when we're responding what the hydrants are. They're color coordinated. We normally don't catch what we call a dead end hydrant, which would be a red painted hydrant. So we normally don't catch that. But in that little stretch, that was our only option upon arrival. And then we had to do some, what we do, pump ops where we drag hose from a larger volume, a blue hydrant, which is our highest volume, and then relay pump from one pump to another to increase the pressure. But because we were already committed at that point to that we didn't realize what the hydrant is. So I know we spoke with Kevin and you know, we look at those things when we do pre-plan. When we get to the point where this is built, we will do a pre-plan, and then that'll go into our crisis and say, upon arrival, if something was to happen, here's your nearest and your best hydrant.
Great.
We'd have to see what the site plan looks like. We can work with the developer on how that, having a hydrant on site sometimes hinders us from operations too, right? Because where it's located, we'd have to go in and set up. And then once you're set there, you're committed, you're not dragging hose. So it kind of hinders our operations sometimes with hydrants on site. It's easier to catch a hydrant at the street or at a corner, and you know exactly what you're getting. Sometimes on private property, who's maintaining them is some of the things that we look at. When they're city-owned hydrants, the city maintains them, they're properly maintained, and we know that they're going to be working.
Okay, I'm going to give one more try to the phone call online with a hand up. You went to the trouble to put your hand up, so 1-519-670 is the start to your phone number. Please, if you can, unmute yourself and let us know who you are, and I'll give you, oh, look, I think we're unmuted. Please tell us who you are and what your question is. One more try.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Way to go.
All right.
Excellent.
It's David Hinge at 58 Walnut Street, right directly across the street from this project. The last time during construction, it was really hard on our house. Our house is a 200-year-old home that we own, and the cracks that we've seen just from the tamping alone from the lot across the street, for some reason, they tamped like 4 times. We came home one day and our front lawn was dug up, and in half of our driveway, we didn't have access even to get into our home. We had no notice. The water main apparently is in front of our house. We had zero notice about that was going to happen. They still haven't repaired the sidewalk in front of our house or our lawn. The traffic from across the street, our driveways line up. We've got to wait. They don't stop coming out. It's the constant line of people flying down our street. There's a stop sign at the end of their driveway that apparently doesn't exist to them. And we've had to wait minutes to get out of our own driveway on Walnut Street, which is crazy. The dirt, like Mr. Langley commented on, was just as bad. We just put new windows in our home and we can't open them or use them. The screens are all clogged with the dirt. These are just a few of the concerns that we've had with the construction here. We do not feel at all that the city takes into consideration how we feel and how this affects us and on Walnut Street. We lived here 12 years, and it used to be a beautiful neighborhood. Yeah, it's been like 5 years ongoing with this construction across the street and a mess. And we had to look at, then they started storing their equipment and stuff across the street. So we had to look at construction equipment in our residential area that they just leave there with no concern at all. So, those are just some of the concerns that we have that we needed to voice. Really no questions, just more concerns. And we really thank you for listening and giving us the stage to voice this.
Well, thank you for sharing with us what you already know. And I know that the cleanliness of homes in construction area, former Mayor Peters and I had a lot of conversation about that when the St. Catherine Street construction was going on, because and maybe it's something we need to continue to talk about with our own planning people too when large construction projects are going on. Thank you. Councillor Clark?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd just like to go back to Church Street from Walnut to Talbot and the opening of it. I understand we don't want to be doing something and then with ongoing construction until 29, so you don't want curbs and gutters and trying to do, say, Walnut Street. But I really think that Church Street opening up would alleviate some of that traffic that people are seeing coming down Stanley Street. You've got the growth of the project, you've got the staging of materials, you've got the ongoing interest in Jumbo, as well as the elevated park there. So having that other entrance and exit on Church Street, I think would solve a lot of things. And it doesn't have to have curbs or gutters, but it could certainly be a paved road that meets the needs until the whole area is done in terms of elevation, curbs, gutters, and water and things like that in as Kevin was talking about, doing the whole area. But I think in the meantime, you could certainly open up that road and help alleviate a lot of the problems.
I'd like to thank you, Councillor Clark, as becoming the new Assistant Deputy Engineer from Council. So Councillor Wookie has stepped down apparently. Kevin, could you help us? I'm not asking you for a decision on that tonight, but is there a possibility, and should it be part of us looking at this project in a whole?
Through the mayor to council, opening up Center Street, we did our transportation master plan. We modeled all of the development through there. It would be a local roadway. Stanley Street's a minor collector roadway. And so most of the traffic will be funneled through Stanley Street in order to access anywhere within this area. So in my opinion, I would see most of the traffic filtering there. I'm going to go point A to point B as fast as I can. I'm not sure if I would detour down Old Talbot Hill to hit Church Street to get to this development or not, is basically my comment. If we want to open it up, again, that's up to the road authority, and that is this council. I have no issue with doing that if that's the direction that's given. In terms of doing it on an interim basis, whenever you pave something, you have impervious area, that water needs to go somewhere. We heard about drainage issues in this area. We need to improve the outlet down Old Talbot Hill to Kettle Creek before we start doing those types of things. And so that's the very most important piece. I did want to note, fire hydrants isn't necessarily the solution to fighting fires. Is the water supply. And so some of that has been addressed through the Center Street project that we did just last year, and the rest of it would be addressed through Old Talbot Hill to provide the supply that's necessary for this area.
So you have those things now in mind, not suggesting your conclusion on it, but you now have heard it. And so, okay, great. Perfect. Further questions, hands up, kind of comments, further questions from above. I'll ask once more, is there any other questions or comments that need to happen? If everyone has been given, I see nothing else happening. So one more ask of council or of our members in the gallery or the members online, raise hand if you need it. If not, then I will suggest that we've given fair opportunity to express views regarding this proposal. And if there are no further questions, please be advised that any person wishing further information on the actions of council regarding the passing of a bylaw for the proposed amendment should email customer service at customerservice@stthomas.ca and provide your name and address. Those who do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified should call customer service at 519-631-1680, extension 0, and provide the same information, your name and address. This public meeting is now concluded.